This is your brain on isms. Back 20 years ago, when I used to read reviews of my work, one of the best things anybody ever said about me was that at some point in his career, everyone will hate Derek Jensen because they will feel betrayed by him, because he refuses to adhere to any particular ideology, but instead goes wherever his analysis leads him. And that was, I thought, the greatest compliment that I could receive. And I see this all the time. I hear even people, excuse me, even people in ideologies that I roughly agree with, I'll hear them say, well, I believe this because I am a something. They could say, I believe this because I'm an environmentalist. I believe this because I'm a radical feminist. I believe this because, or things I don't necessarily agree with. I believe this because I'm a Catholic. I believe this because I'm a Buddhist. Because I'm a Buddhist, blah, blah. And that's completely backwards. You shouldn't believe something because you're a radical feminist. You shouldn't believe something because you're a Buddhist. You shouldn't believe something because you're a Seventh-day Adventist. You should be a Seventh-day Adventist because you believe something. What you believe should lead you to what you I care for wild nature, and I don't care for wild nature because I'm an environmentalist. I'm an environmentalist because I care for wild nature. And those two could not be any more opposite in their meaning in many ways, because I don't believe in adhering to an ideology. This was a problem I had with anarchism, is that I thought that anarchism was supposed to be about no gods, no masters. And then I ended up getting in trouble because I didn't run my various thoughts past the Anarchist Central Committee. And that's the problem with all of these ideologies, is that they become frozen and can become dogmatic instead of being open to critical thought. And so Tom Robbins wrote a wonderful piece about this back in the, 80s or so, about how, I'm gonna see if I can find it and we'll come back. Back in 1980, Tom Robbins, in Still Life with Woodpecker, wrote about this beautifully. He said, ideas are definitely unstable. They not only can be misused, they invite misuse. And the better the idea, the more volatile it is. That's because only the better ideas turn into dogma. And it's this process whereby a fresh, stimulating, humanly helpful idea is changed into robot dogma that is deadly. In terms of hazardous vectors released, the transformation of ideas into dogma rivals the transformation of hydrogen into helium, uranium into lead, or innocence into corruption. And it's nearly as relentless. The problem starts at the secondary level, not with the originator or developer of the idea, but with the people who are attracted to it, who adopt it, who cling to it until their last nail breaks, and who invariably lack the overview, flexibility, imagination, and most importantly, sense of humor to maintain it in the spirit in which it was hatched. Ideas are made by masters, dogma by disciples, and the Buddha is always killed on the road. And this is what we see. So we see, let's pretend for a moment that Jesus was a real guy and he went around talking about love. And within a couple hundred years, people were killing each other on the streets in his name, or less than a couple hundred years. And within a couple hundred years, Constantine was conquering under the sign of the cross. And this is what we see. I love Joseph Campbell's line about this, that he says that taking these ideas as literal truth is the equivalent of eating the menu instead of the items that the menu represents at the restaurant. And that's what we see so often with people who cling to ideas that they don't understand. Is I love the idea that if you can't explain your idea to a second grader, you probably don't understand it yet. And I find this often in writing. This is why I write books, is that people will say, well, what do you think about this subject? And it's like, I don't know, I haven't written about it yet. And in writing about it, I explore it. And it takes me to places that I may not have expected. And I have great respect for those who can come across new information and change their minds. And one great example of this was Lewis Mumford, who prior to World War II wrote several books very strongly in favor of technology. And World War II convinced him that technology as a whole, while it brings great goodies, great power to those who wield it, as a whole was harmful to society, and spent the rest of his career articulating that, the rest of his life articulating that. And I think it's okay. Here's part of the problem, is that this is our brain on isms. And unfortunately, when we're on isms, we've outsourced our brains, and we stop thinking, and we accept that. What's that bumper sticker? God said it, I believe it, that settles it. And we are sentient beings, and it is our responsibility and joy to think our way through and to attempt to articulate for ourselves what we actually believe and feel, not what we've been told to believe and feel, not what. I mean, this is central to all of my work. One of my favorite quotes ever is, unquestioned beliefs are the real authorities of any culture. And it's not, I mean, there's a cliche that goes around these days that is something like, if you find out who you can't question, that's who's really in charge, or something like that. And I think that there is some truth to that, but I think there are deeper truths, which is when you ask yourself what things you can't question within yourself. I mean, that's where you've really got to start. Again, this is your brain on isms. This is your brain not being sentient.